And that is why you saw the reaction from protesters. That is why the virulence of anger remains. Activists are necessarily calling into question what's actually being done. And what I would say is that there's a legitimacy to this anger. There's a legitimacy to this outrage. A man was murdered because he was asleep in a drive-through. And we know that this is not an isolated occurrence. We also know that a man taking a taser from a police officer in Pennsylvania resulted in his arrest. But because this person was black, it resulted in his death. Those are conversations that have to be had not only through speeches, but through the decisions made by budget allocations. And I think that's the next conversation we have to have in Atlanta.
Well, lots of lies here, lots of untruth from the supposed governor of Georgia, except she lost. Oh, that's right. She lost. But the media still lets her go around saying she actually won that election. That's no problem. Stacey Abrams here. Notice the way that she says a man was killed because he fell asleep at a drive-thru. Is that why he was killed, everybody? Is that a true statement? That's why a man was killed because he fell asleep at a drive-thru? Is that why he was being arrested? Is that why he was shot? Do you see any pushback from the media on this? This is why, the media is, I think that one of the problems that we have is that for people like me, we're so outnumbered. There's so many more masses in the lib media, and there's so much more corporate muscle behind them. Sponsors, all the biggest companies. Oh yeah, we'll advertise on MSNBC with those lunatics. But if you're a conservative, that's trouble, or we could get boycotted all the time. There's so much going for them. And so people like me end up being this voice of opposition, being a kind of ostracized insurgency within our own society, because this is just the reality that we're living in. And there are so fewer of us that we end up saying the media. This has become an almost manic fixation trying to push back on this. But they're the reason that people believe things like this. They're the reason that people believe that black men are being killed for falling asleep at a drive-thru. So there will be individuals who hear that soundbite from Stacey Abrams, and they don't think, she's just being a little inflammatory, or, no. There will be some individuals, just give it time, who hear soundbites like that and do what we saw in Dallas but a few years ago, where 6 cops were murdered by someone inspired by the rhetoric of Black Lives Matter. It will happen. It will happen again. But don't expect any conversations to happen now about Democrats poisoning the discussion of race relations in this country and just making it all so much more heated and angry and vicious than it should ever be. Don't expect any of that. They're frauds. They're cowards, too. Think of the people, I do this often. Think of the people, who are generally elevated in conservative media. It's not true across the board. There are some fakers. There are some frauds. There's some people that are really quick to claim that they're beyond reproach in their personal lives, and it's not the case, right? There are people who are just not what they seem to be to some folks. But generally speaking, the conservatives that you see in media that are elevated are people of conscience and courage. Because it's tough. Oh, my gosh, it'd be so much easier to be on the other side. It's tough over here. On the left, the people that are elevated are often odious human beings. They're not good people, right? Keith, what was his? Keith, Mr. Precious Perfect. Who's that guy? Overman, like the worst human being ever. You hear all these stories. Anybody who knows Fake Tapper will tell you the guy's a horrifying jerk. And some conservatives suck up to him, which is just grotesque. Also, you just go down the list. Go down the list of the people that are elevated over there at CNN. And there's so many of them. Look at Cuomo. I don't have to tell you. Just watch a video of him. Yeah, he's really tough when he's threatening somebody that he outweighs by about 70 pounds who is 6 inches shorter than him. Really, real tough guy. But anyway, the media just allows these corrosive and destructive narratives to flourish and pushes them to flourish. I shouldn't say allows. They make sure that this happens. To say that a man was murdered because he was asleep in a drive-thru is a lie. That's not what happened here. And also to say that it was murder. I know the district attorney said there might be murder charges. What's the claim going to be? So now we're going to set a standard that you have to allow a criminal to electrocute you as a cop, because that's not going to kill you. It's just going to electrocute you, and hope that they don't take your service weapon, or just kick your face in when you're on the ground. Make sure you have a brain hemorrhage and die that way. Then that's the new expectation, because it's useful to live politically in this moment. Man, can I also note that if you're looking at the statistics, yeah, I mean, you have about roughly one or fewer unarmed black Americans killed in America every month by last year's statistics, that might be around that this year, too. You've got double that amount of white Americans killed unarmed by cops. And I can't tell you how many journalists, people that are supposed to be trading in information and knowledge, will throw up this argument of this wouldn't have happened if he were white. It happens to twice as many unarmed white people in America every year by the Washington Post statistics. So how can anyone be so stupid as to just assume, well, this wouldn't have happened to me? No, unarmed white people get shot too. And sometimes it's horrible and murder and criminal. Same thing with unarmed black people. It's horrible. It's murder. It's criminal. But we have to at least have a process, an investigation, and laws applied faithfully. No, instead we've got the mob. Feed the mob. Get the mob angry. And for those who are still trying to push this line that this is about reform, this isn't about defunding police. Well, here is Ilhan Omar, who represents the district that was the most damaged in the riots, those horrific riots in Minneapolis. Here she is saying that the Minneapolis PD, it's not about reform. Just gut the whole thing. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Play four.
You can't really reform a department that is rotten to the root. What you can do is rebuild. And so this is our opportunity, as a city, to come together, have the conversation of what public safety looks like, who enforces the most dangerous crimes that take place in our community. And just like San Francisco did, right now they're moving towards a process where there is a separation of the kind of crimes that solicit the help of officers and the kind of crimes that we should have someone else respond to.
You can't reform a department that is rotten to the core. She is saying that every person who wears the uniform in Minneapolis, she's saying that they're all bad. They're all tainted by this. The whole department, everybody there, they're all racists. They're all bad people. They're not doing a tough, incredibly necessary job to make sure that all of us can walk the streets of our cities, of our towns in safety. To know that there's at least a chance that someone might come, especially for those of us who are disarmed, who have had our Second Amendment rights taken from us, like here in New York, in Chicago, places where there's still plenty of crime and no ability to defend yourself, unless you're going to grab a frying pan when the home invasion starts. Good luck with that. Many of us still want to be able to pick up a phone and call the cops and hope that there's some chance that they're going to arrive and save us. Many of us also recognize that possibility prevents a whole lot of crime as well, that the bad guys do a cost-benefit analysis. But if they know they can get away with things, guess what? They're more likely to do them. And this goes to the very core of the social obligation that the state has to its citizens, to its people, to protect us and to enforce the law. That is step one. That is step one. Step two is to protect our property, of course, but that's these days. Profits over lives. You hear all these Marxist chants from the left. The defund cop movement is appalling, and it's real. And the Democratic Party owns this. Don't let them get away in a few months from what they've been saying now while they're trying to get their activist base fired up. And they're also distracting us, too. They're distracting us from the unbelievable hypocrisy that is underway right now, where they're trying to tell us that we still have to abide by social distancing, except for the thousands and thousands of Black Trans Lives Matter protesters. They can do whatever they want. De Blasio, the mayor of New York, is out marching with them, is out partaking in these events. And we're told that they might shut us down. You can't make this stuff up. I am starting to lose it over here, folks. The libs have completely lost their minds, and they think that we're crazy because we believe that what they said yesterday and were forcing us to do yesterday should still matter today. But no, all that matters, politics. That's it.
I am warning today, in a nice way, consequences of your actions. We have 25,000 complaints statewide. I'm not going to turn a blind eye to them. New Yorkers deserve better. Manhattan and the Hamptons are the leading areas in the state with violations. These are not hard-to-spot violations. People send video of these violations. You can look it up on social media. You don't need a detective squad to go out and find it. They are rampant, and there's not enough enforcement.
He's promising there's going to be more enforcement now. That's right. He's going to start going after businesses, going to pull their restaurant liquor licenses if they don't enforce more. Remember, this is about social distancing. There people are out there that he's talking about. A lot of them are they're wearing masks too. This is one of the ways they tried to get away with the protest, with the flagrant hypocrisy. This is the way they try to get away with it. Saying, oh, well, the protesters are wearing masks. Well, first of all, some of them are wearing masks so they can't be easily identified for their illegal behavior by the cops when they're rioting and looting and acting like barbarians. There's that. But then there's also, well, hold on a second, social distancing. I mean, if masks were enough that you didn't need any social distancing, then why the heck can't we open everything? Right? In fact, we were told by Dr. Fauci. I remember Fauci has told us many times over that the mitigation effort, the best part of the mitigation effort is the social distancing. You got to do it. You know, this is what the data tells us to do, the social distance. But you know, if you wear a mask, maybe good, maybe not. I don't know. Wear a mask because why not? You know, covers your face, maybe keeps you from swallowing a mosquito or a gnat or other species of small insect that flies. Wear a mask. Well, hold on a second. Social distancing was the most important one. Protests are massive and flagrant violations of social distancing. That they think they're changing society and making it all better for us does not change the science, as Fauci would say, or the data. Do you think that Governor Cuomo has such condescending, smug words about social distancing when it comes to protests? Oh, of course not. Of course not. Because the protests are important. You going to your job, you being able to go to the gym, you being able to go see loved ones, go to a funeral, go to a wedding, go to a graduation. Graduations all could have happened. Everybody wears a mask, right? No, not allowed. Not allowed. Can't. Too risky. Too risky. What's happening right now, these protests, they will achieve nothing. They're all pretending they're going to remake society, everything's all better. No, they're making people angrier at each other, but there's no good faith effort to reach out to the other side. There's no good faith effort from the media to try to bring people into a conversation. This is the most radical left-wing Marxist positions imaginable foisted upon the American people. And using one area of narrative, Black Lives Matter, telling everybody that cops are killing unarmed black men in a systemic and continuous way, using that as the tip of the spear for all of these other movements that really are just Marxism. It's just socialism, the left's remaking of society, destruction of the family. Destroying the family is, in fact, part of the plan here. It always has been. That's what the left wants. Because the family, the family is that one place where we all understand at a basic level, one, that we want a society that functions well, not a society that we pretend functions well. We want a society where our children and our loved ones are protected. But, if you're gonna tell people, well, we can't have safe streets, but it's important for social justice, we don't want cops to get too rough with criminals, you're not gonna have a safe family. That's not gonna happen. But they're willing to sacrifice you and your children and your future and your rights to their vision, right? So the destruction of the family is very important in that. It's also a place where when the government begins to violate your rights when it comes to your family, then you really chafe at that. That enrages people in a way, and it should. And my family is more important to me than the government. I love my family more than I love the government by a lot. I don't love the government at all, but you know what I mean. In fact, my family is more important to me than any government mandate. My family is more important to me than any government law. So that's why the destruction of family bonds, this is what you saw in the Soviet Union, is so necessary for the utopian project that the left is trying to force upon all of us. Isn't it fascinating that they are decrying the use of state force as the primary method of advancing this movement? But then they turn around and the first moment they can, they will use state force against those who do not comply. Right. So what we have here, we have an America where protesters are out there, and as part of the protest, there are riots that have happened, and there's looting that happens. And their big concern is that the cops are being too rough with those people. Meanwhile, the cops will show up and tell you, shut down your business. I mean, if they pull a liquor license, you're done. Shut down your business. You have no rights. Your property, your savings, it's all evaporating before your eyes. And if you try to open your business anyway, men with guns will come in and shut it down. And you know what will happen if you say, no, officer, and you try to push them out and say, I'm sorry, we're going to operate our business in violation of social distancing? They're going to put hands on you and they're going to arrest you. So they will use the force of the state for authoritarian idiocy, shutting down restaurants, shutting down outdoor gatherings, all these things that have been happening. They're comfortable with that use of force, and then they turn around and focus in on a very small, by the statistics, use of police force against unarmed people. We'll just make it about unarmed people. And then below that, they'll even do a subset of just a focus on unarmed black people and their interactions with the police and pretend that this is the greatest social harm that's happening in this country. And that's the big problem. No, they love force from the state as long as it is to enforce what they want and their vision for the country and their policies, which means the trampling of the Constitution, of individual rights, of property rights, you name it. All of that can be swept aside in the name of social justice, which is just a warmed over cultural Marxism that we continue to suffer through in this country. Instead of addressing problems and making things better, we have people that think just march and scream, and that'll make it all work. Today was not a good day for the rule of law in this country. And no, I'm not talking about protests or riots right now, although we certainly could. I'm talking about a 6-3 Supreme Court decision, Bostock v. Clayton County. This is a momentous Supreme Court decision that will have enormous implications for a lot of things in this country, and my friends, it will affect every single one of you listening to this right now, and your children and your children's children. This is a big one. And there are so many different ways that I want to describe what's going on here, or so many different aspects of this. Let's start with the basics. This is a case in which they put together really three different claims, three different cases, but the basics of it are that two individuals were fired from their jobs for being gay, and a third individual was fired from her job for being transgender. And we're going to get into the pronoun usage thing here too, because this is going to matter in ways that's going to affect even how conservatives are able to talk about these issues. Get ready for that. So by a 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court, and amazingly enough, Gorsuch writing for the majority here. Gorsuch writing for the majority has declared that Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act covers sexual discrimination based on any sexual orientation or sexual identity. Right. So that's an enormous expansion of what had been thought to be the Civil Rights Act of 1964's intent. What I think is so interesting and so disturbing about this is that Gorsuch, writing for the majority, admits that in 1960, and let's just, there's a lot of ways you could spend, look, you could do a whole class just on this case and all the different, and I mean a whole course of study on this case and all the different precedents. But the very basic, at the root of this issue is, does sex discrimination as written in the 1964 Civil Rights Act include people who are members of the LGBTQ community or not? Everyone understands, and no one disagrees with this, that the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title VII, addresses sex as an issue of male or female in employment. So you cannot discriminate against somebody who is male or who is female because of their gender distinction between those two genders. That has been known, it has been understood. And you know it has been known this way because Congress, the Democrats, the left, have repeatedly tried to pass legislation to add to the understanding of the to add to the statute from 1964, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, Title VII, saying there's no discrimination on the basis of sex. And they have been unsuccessful in many cases. There are about, I think it's 20 states that still do not have specific protections. So this was a state-by-state issue that do not have protections for discrimination in hiring and in employment based on LGBTQ status. Essentially, sexual attraction, sexual identity, right? Those are, as opposed to sex as male-female. That's what this issue is really about. Gorsuch, writing for the majority here, joining all the libs, joining Sotomayor, and was able to say that they know that the law was passed just for men and women, but now they're going to reinterpret the law to include all these other things too. That sex now has to mean anything touching on or dealing with sex, meaning gender. And so gender identity, gender dysphoria, gender attraction, same sex, etc. All of that is now covered under Title VII at a federal level. Whatever state you're in now, this is the law. Doesn't matter what your state legislatures have been passing for years and years. Now, you have Kavanaugh dissenting because there's a few layers here. Kavanaugh dissenting in part, or rather dissenting from the majority opinion, even though he would agree with the outcome, because he says that, look, I think that people should be protected. And I think there will be many people that hold this point of view. I mean, I certainly would agree that no person who is of the same-sex community should be discriminated against because of that attraction, because of that sexual orientation. Shouldn't be discriminated against in hiring, right? That firing somebody because they are gay is an odious thing to do. But what Kavanaugh is saying here is that you have to have statutory changes. You can't just say, I am going to take this law and pretend that it says something it doesn't say because I think that's a good thing. This is the living Constitution, left-wing, legislating from the bench argument, which is what has happened here. They are legislating from the bench 6-3. And the Supreme Court is now showing us once again that the left gets its way and does it even with the complicity of so-called conservative judges. Notice that the liberal judges on the court always know how they're supposed to vote on the big issues and never break ranks. But all you need is one or two conservatives who feel that pressure. Oh, there's so much pressure. What's going to be written about them in the New York Times editorial page? What's going to be written about them in the history books? Oh, do you want to be a hero? Do you want to be celebrated as a civil rights icon? Well, not icon. You'll just be slightly less debased as an evil fascist if you're a conservative on the court, right? This will buy you a little bit of goodwill, but not much at all. And so this is showing us that the reality here is the Supreme Court is essentially just another political fight. The Supreme Court is now all about what it is that people want, and that the law itself does not really matter. I mean, here's a very short summary. Justice Alito, with whom Justice Thomas joins, dissenting. So Kavanaugh dissents by saying, look, guys, this is not law. He's like, I like what it does. I want to protect people who are LGBTQ. But this is not. And that's, I mean, Gorsuch, what an astonishing really just undermining of core legal principles he's a part of here. And he's writing for the majority. Just, those of you who are constitutionalists, a big knife in the back from Neil Gorsuch, whom I unfortunately said some nice things to the president about but a few weeks ago when he was talking to me about judges. And now I feel I was wrong on that one. Gorsuch, stunning. But Alito and Thomas join. And this is the very beginning of their dissent. There is only one word for what the court has done today: legislation. The document that the court releases is in the form of a judicial opinion interpreting a statute, but that is deceptive. Right. They're writing a federal law here. They all agree that the law as passed by Congress did not intend and did not say at the time the thing that they are now claiming it covers and says. This is the same kind of violence to the law that we see done by decisions like Roe v. Wade. Oh, there's an inherent right to privacy that somehow is contained in the Constitution, even though we never saw it before. Now sex means anything touching on sex. A lot of things touch on sex, folks. This is going to be quite a decision that has implications that stretch on for years, for decades, really. And it shows you that the left understands the stakes here. It also, I'm just going to say it, for a lot of people that have pushed for the Trump presidency and said, look at the judges, look at the judges. What does the Federalist Society have to say about this one? Neil Gorsuch, signed, sealed, and delivered by the Federalist Society. And he just took a sledgehammer to constitutional originalism. A sledgehammer. Well, what does this mean going forward? You can't try, and Gorsuch, he's already, once you've crossed this Rubicon, once you've betrayed originalism, you'll do it again, because why not? You're already shown who you are, which is somebody who wants to have a pat on the back, a little pat on the head from the left, from the libs, from the elite legal circles. They've taken over the law schools too, folks. Ask anybody who's a conservative who's gotten a law degree in recent last decade or two. The law schools are every bit as liberal as the undergrad programs. The only difference is the law school leftists are learning to undermine and distort and weaponize the law for the purposes of their vision of the country as this socialist utopia. That's what's happening, right? A social justice obsessed dystopia is what we're getting, but they always get their way. When was the last time you had a Supreme Court decision that came down, even though we're told the court is conservative, and where you had Ginsburg on a big issue join the conservatives? Doesn't happen. Sotomayor on a big issue join the conservatives. Doesn't happen. Nope. They can always, because they're true ideologues, the left is about power and getting its way. They can always count on their judges to give them the rulings that their political side wants, irrespective of what the law, of what the text itself says, which is what we've seen here. This is as bad a Supreme Court decision as you can see, because the plain meaning, and they accept that the plain meaning of sex was male, female. That was it. And that was what Congress passed. That was the intent. That was what was written down. They're saying, well, now we're going to say that sex is a much broader thing that includes a whole lot of other stuff that we like. Justice Thomas, Justice Alito still have principles. What about the rest of these judges? Well, Sotomayor and Kagan and Ginsburg. How much of a real victory can it feel like when we have Trump appointing judges, when we know that conservative judges are not reliable? When it's really tight, when the politics are really strong, conservative judges will. And I'm not saying they're not reliable, like they should just give us what they want. Gorsuch has abandoned the fundamental originalism that is supposed to be the bedrock of his constitutional interpretation, of his statutory review as a judge. Abandon it. I mean, this would be like me showing up being like, you know what, guys, vote Biden this fall. I mean, I just think that that's the way to go. You'd say, who kidnapped Buck? And, you know, off mic, does somebody have a silent pistol pointed at his head, right? You'd be like, what the heck is... And you'd be right to say that. I mean, Gorsuch, this is... Unless he's making a hostage video when his staff... It's really the staff that writes his opinion. When they wrote this opinion, you'd be saying, how could he do this? How could he do this? Sure enough. This has big implications right now. And I want to tell you what's coming. So that's the on just a pure legal. And I was reading the decision this morning with my coffee, trying not to spit it out all over the screen. But there are implications of this, and it will affect all of you. If you're listening to this anywhere in the United States right now, to our foreign team, Buck, hey, what's up? Don't worry. You guys don't have to worry about this. For the rest of you, I want to tell you what is going to change and what you can expect that will matter to your church, to your school, to your kids, everything in a moment. Team, I tell you not to bend the knee to the mob. And I stand behind that every day. And trust me, there have been plenty of times when I have been asked in one way or another or demanded that I bend the knee, and I have refused to do so. But there's also the respect for the rule of law that we have. And that's going to come into conflict very soon, or right now, really. Based on the Supreme Court decision, here's something that I can assure you is going to become very, very much enforced. I am now going to be expected, as a function of law, unless I'm misreading something. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a guy who reads a lot. But I have some brilliant, constitutionally minded lawyer friends that I can always reach out to for advice, as I did this morning as well on this decision. And I ran this by one of them, and he said that, yes, you're correct in your interpretation of this. That now if I refer to let's say a colleague who is a male, a biological male, as he instead of the preferred she, if that individual's transgender, I could be legally liable. I could be sued under federal discrimination law, thanks to the Supreme Court. So I am now in a position where I am to be forced into accepting and affirming a falsehood, a clear falsehood, or I will be subject to federal sanction. In fact, I wonder if even talking about this very soon will become itself a sanctionable offense. A man can claim to be a woman can claim to be a man, and you must affirm that with pronouns and in every way you talk about that individual, or else. It's not about being polite anymore. It's about bend the knee because the law says so. I'm telling you, I'm getting pretty sick and tired of having the law tell me to bend the knee. But I also will say to you, we must pick when we storm the trench, so to speak. And I am not an advocate for running into the machine gun fire unnecessarily, so to speak. We need to fight back on this issue, but we have to be smart about how we do it and when we do it. And then there's also this. There is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, the RFRA, which right now protects, if there's a compelling religious practice standard, protects them from lawsuits had protected them from lawsuits, or at least was a defense against them for discrimination in transgender cases and so on, and LGBTQ discrimination cases. Get ready for an avalanche of lawsuits, ACLU and everywhere else, that they're going to eliminate Catholic churches, traditional Christian churches. I know there's a lot of churches these days that are like social justice seminars, but traditional churches, and particularly the Catholic Church and any institutions affiliated with them, schools, daycare, you name it, they're all about to get sued. This is a huge step toward the secular left's war on believing Christians. It's going to be overwhelmingly Christians. There will be some Jewish targeting, I'm sure, as well. But it won't be any Muslim targeting by the left, by the ACLU. But get ready for this. This is a huge step in the anti-faith war of the left.